Today's guest is an expert in marketing, analytics, and more recently in generative AI. In this episode, we will talk about when you need to use disclosures surrounding your AI usage, especially if you're working with companies in the EU. We'll talk about how AI is really changing the game for SEO. We'll talk about how large technical companies can use AI even with really confidential information. And we will talk about how marketers can use AI to be better at their own jobs. And then lastly, a great topic that comes up here is how to figure out which jobs to give to AI. We walk through a framework to help you understand how to best use your time and your resources. All right, listen up.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, TREW Marketing. TREW is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit trewmarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm Morgan Norris, and I'm hosting today for Wendy as she's off on vacation to celebrate her daughter graduating from college. I handle brand strategy here at TREW Marketing. I've been on this podcast a lot, but today I am joined by Christopher Penn, who's the co-founder and chief data scientist at Trust Insights. Chris's weekly newsletter and his videos are a favorite resource of my team. They're something we constantly pass around or, did you see this in the newsletter? And so I'm so glad he's here to just share his expertise on the show today. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'd love to kick off if you would share a little bit about kind of your career journey and then what you do at Trust Insights now and what you guys are doing as an organization.
Sure. So my career journey is a long, circuitous mess. My background, my undergraduate degree is in political science with a focus on stateless transnational terrorism, which gets almost no use.
Oh my gosh.
My graduate degree is in IT, that almost gets no use. And I started in IT. So my first career positions were in IT. And then in the early 2000s, I worked for the startup. And during that decade, IT became marketing, became the field that we now know as marketing technology. So I worked at a financial services company for a while and, update the web server became update the website, administer the Linux piece of software, SendMail, became send the email newsletter. And that was where I really made the transition into marketing. In the 2010s, I was at a MarTech startup for a while. That was in email marketing. And then I moved into a public relations firm. And the reason I moved there was because they had some interesting measurement challenges that I wanted to tackle. And that was when I started picking up data science and machine learning, what we now call AI, because there were mathematical problems that you couldn't solve with just regular old-fashioned, Google Analytics. You actually had to, the machines had to do a bunch of math. And so that was really, 2013 was when I started working in artificial intelligence. And then around late 2017, early 2018, the PR firm I was working at went one direction. I said, I think there's a lot more to be had in this other area in artificial intelligence. And so we parted ways. And my account director at the time, Katie Robert, we decided we were going to co-found Trust Insights. So she became the CEO, and then I just became sort of the mad scientist, if you will. And today, we are a management consulting firm that specializes in analytics, data science, and AI. Essentially, if a company has data that they're not using well, or they don't know they have their data, we can come in and help them use their data better. And now with the advent of tools like, the generative AI world, using that data even more intelligently and more cleverly.
Okay, love it. I think we all probably have data that we don't even know is there that we could be using and should be using. So that's
correct.
Awesome. Okay, tell me about. I mentioned that we love your newsletters. So Chris has a newsletter, and he will also record it as a video. And there's an audio option as well. And so I love that. It's whatever way you want to consume information, you can consume it. It's super helpful. But you do start that newsletter and your videos with a disclosure. Will you talk about that a little bit and why that's important?
Sure, that is a content authenticity statement, and that is it's partly to some degree regulatory. So the EU just ratified the last stage, it's about a week ago, the final passage of the AI Act, and two of the major provisions in there is that companies must document the use of artificial intelligence and must disclose it when it is public facing for any use of it. So if you're doing business in the EU, or the people in the EU are doing business with you, you should be adhering to those regulations. And I should probably add a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. Please consult your attorney for advice specific to your situation. But the other thing is assertion of copyright. In almost all nations on the planet, machines cannot hold copyright. Machine-made content. So this in the U.S., this stems from a ruling from 2018, Naruto versus Slater, in which a chimpanzee took a selfie, and the photographer tried to copyright it. It went to court, and the court ruled that the chimp did the work, not the human, and chimps can't hold copyright. Only humans can. That ruling has then been extended to machine-made content. So when you disclose what content, if any, in your publications is made by AI, by definition, you're also reinforcing your copyright your on the human-made stuff, saying, hey, 100% of this newsletter is made by a human. If you copy and paste it, you're violating copyright, and I can send a team of heavily armed lawyers to your place. Whereas if you think about it, if you have like a blog post and the headline image is AI generated, and you don't have a disclaimer, someone could reasonably assume that the entire post was machine generated, and then you'd have, you could still sue them, but you would have a harder time asserting your copyright than if you say, hey, the image to this post was generated by a machine, but the copy was written by humans, so you can copy the image because we can't do anything about it. It's not copyrightable. But if you copy our blog post, the lawyers are going to punch you in the face.
Yep. That's a big thing. Paul Reitzer's been talking about that quite a bit recently, just the fact that if you're an agency, you've got to be really careful if you're creating any sort of content. You shouldn't be creating content solely using generative AI, but if you are, and you are handing that over to a client as work product, and they're expecting to take kind of copyright ownership of that, they can't if it was created by a machine. So
that's correct. You cannot assign copyrights to things that are copyright free.
Yeah, I didn't know the thing about the picture. It's an interesting origin story for that. Everything's got one. Okay, so tell me this. When we're talking about generative AI, so our audience is a lot of marketers targeting highly technical audiences. So really specialized design engineers, test engineers, things like that. The information that they share, the stuff they're talking about is really, really nuanced. And so they're not using generative AI to write an entire article or plan a campaign. But what are some ways that even in kind of a nuanced field like that, these marketers can accelerate or just improve their marketing using generative AI?
One of the best use cases is if you as a marketer don't understand what's being discussed. So for example, there is a concept in engineering called building information management, BIM. BIM is essentially digital twinning of a building. And one of the things that, if you are a marketer and you are not in engineering, you're not an engineer, you might struggle to say, well, what the heck is this? Why does this exist? How can I explain this, or how can I write content about this that's intelligent, that doesn't make me look like a total idiot to our audience who is engineers?
Yeah.
And so these tools are fantastic professional development tools. You can say, hey, in the field of, in AEC, explain what BIM is in terms of pizza. And the software will say, well, BIM is a lot like making a test run of a pizza that you can modify before you actually bake the thing, right? You can test the number of ingredients, how it looks, what temperature you need to bake it at, and the software can simulate that. And then when you're happy with it, then you pass the final design of the pizza to someone to actually make the pizza, and now you have a really nice pizza. And it comes out exactly right. It's a silly example when it's coming to a pizza, but when it's coming to $100 million building, you want it to be right the first time, right? You do not want to be going, oh, look at that. The concrete spawned 12-inch voids in it that we now have to go and remediate for an extra $5 million on our dime because we screwed up on the first round. So for marketers who are dealing with very technical concepts, these tools can translate anything into anything else. So whatever you know as a marketer, maybe you know music and you explain this in the circle of fifths. Maybe you know cooking, explain this as a recipe. Maybe you know golf, explain this as the back nine. Whatever the things you know best, you can take any concept you don't understand and have it translated into a concept you do understand.
I love that. I think that's so helpful. That's something I think on our team we've started to really do, especially our writers. Before you go into that meeting with that subject matter expert, to really educate yourself on that topic that you're covering. And even, you're going to ask better questions if you've got more information to start. And so that's really helpful. I definitely could have used that beginning of my career, sitting in a test and measurement instrumentation company, walking into meetings, not knowing what all these terms and acronyms and just little bits and pieces were. So that's a great tip.
Another example on that is updating your own mental database. So for example, I was talking with a friend yesterday. We was talking about dopamine, the neurochemical. And there's been a lot of changes in neurochemistry and neuroscience research in the last decade about the different neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. And so we all have this sort of assumption based on pop culture that dopamine is the reward chemical that makes you happy and that's not true. That's not what it does. What it is, it's a reward-seeking neurotransmitter that makes you want to go and do the thing so that you get the reward. The reward comes from a different set of neurotransmitters.
Interesting.
And how I learned about this was I was doing some research. I took 25 clinical research studies, dumped them into a language model, said synthesize and summarize all 25 into something, and then I explain it in terms I can understand. And it's like, I had it at one point map all the different neurotransmitters to different roles in the C-suite. So like dopamine is the CEO or the chief sales officer. Like, oh, you want this? Go get this. Do this thing. Whereas acetylcholine is like the chief operating officer, and so on and so forth. And it helps keep your mind up to date on what's new and what's happening, and update bad information from the past.
I love that. That's awesome. It's funny how we keep that bad information and we just keep logging it or keep referencing it when those references are broken. And that's awesome. Okay. Tell me, earlier this month in one of your newsletters, or might have been a video I was watching, you were talking about using templates for generative AI and just how that's a great kind of shortcut thing to have in your back pocket as you kind of accelerate your work using generative AI. Talk to us a little bit about templates, what those are, how do you get started, and how do you move forward?
It's not templates themselves. It is when you're trying to identify use cases for generative AI, anything that is a template is a candidate because it's repetitive. So we have an acronym around the shop we call TRIPS. In fact, if you want to download the cheat sheet, there's no form to fill out. Go to trustinsights.ai/TRIPS. And it stands for time. The more time that a task takes, the better a candidate is for generative AI. The R is repetitive. The more repetitive a task is, the better a candidate is for generative AI. The I is important. The less important a task is, the better a candidate is for AI, because just like get rid of all the low value stuff. The P stands for pleasant. How much do you enjoy that task, right? Like, oh, look, expense reports. Who wants to fill those out? No one, right? That's a great candidate for generative AI. And the last is the S, stands for sufficient data. Do you have examples, enough examples to teach an AI tool, a language model in particular, how to do the task? And that is where templates come in. If you've got a template, you have examples. You've got the template itself, and you have filled out versions of the template. So I was doing a workshop last week in Los Angeles in engineering, in architecture and engineering, and one of the participants said, yeah, we have this whole template. We have a whole scoring mechanism for deciding what projects to bid on. We have a go, no-go template. I said, great. We're going to take that template apart under NDA and build and convert it into a format that a language model can use. And now this firm can take 100 RFPs, load them all in one at a time and say, score this, go, no go. Should we even bother bidding on this based on our criteria? And that is a huge time saver because they won't bid on projects that are not a good fit. And it is a revenue booster because they will focus on the projects they're most likely to win.
That's awesome. So taking that kind of quantitative process that they had and using a program, that's great. Okay, more questions, shifting gears while I have you. What are your thoughts on SEO right now? How are you seeing AI impact SEO? Do you have any advice on how to think about SEO as we move forward with generative AI? What's kind of on your mind recently in that front? It's changing a lot. And I feel like we're all, Google included, trying to figure out how to navigate it. And so just interested at kind of what's on your mind recently about SEO in the land of generative AI.
So generative AI is providing, in many cases, a summarization of results, right? The old way of doing things, you type in a search query and you pogo stick through 5, 10, 15 search results, and you have to synthesize what it is you want to know. Sometimes it's easy, right? A commercial intent query, find a coffee shop near me. That's pretty straightforward. A lot of times for informational, you are pogo sticking back and forth 5 or 10 or 15 different sources. Bing started this, Perplexity does this, now Google's AI Answers does, where it says, okay, I'm going to synthesize an answer for you based on the existing sources. Now, sometimes, Google's gotten a lot of attention for this recently, but sometimes it just synthesizes from bad sources and comes up with recommendations like, you should put glue on pizza, which came from, the source that was a Reddit shitpost. And so there's quality issues there still, but fundamentally, what this is doing, it's good for the consumer most of the time. If you've ever been to a recipe website, a food blog, where you're scrolling 33 pages, 70 ads, and someone's roommate, second cousin's, third dog's, best friend, came up with this idea, like, nobody cares, just tell me how much sugar to put in this thing. An AI summary is a better user experience. It reduces friction. And so as a marketer, you have gotten used to creating friction with content. You've gotten used to loading up content with ads or lead forms or whatever. And now the machines are like, well, nope, we're just going to give the answers to the customer because your customer experience is so bad that people would prefer the AI summary. Informational queries, aka unbranded search, is in, I would call, serious trouble for most marketers. Because, again, the machines can summarize better, and the answers are honestly, it's to the point where some websites are such miserable experiences, you would be happier with a wrong answer from an AI than digging through the 40 minutes it's going to take to find the right answer from a garbage website. And so one of the things that we have to tell people and remind people is your ability to be a good marketer, your SEO strategy should have been the same the entire time, which is market your company as though there were no search engines. How would you do that? How would you get people to talk about you? How would you get people to refer you? How would you get people to recommend you without a search engine, without social media algorithms? And that's really hard for a lot of marketers because understanding with a lot of marketers, a lot of companies' products just suck. They're just not very good products. And there's nothing remarkable about that. Seth Godin said it 20 years ago, right? Being remarkable means being worthy of being remarked about. If you make ball bearings, that's not really remarkable, right?
Yep. Yeah, I see that. And I do feel like I'm seeing such a rise in kind of thought leadership, but not even thought leadership at this massive level, but individuals being able to share their expertise and what they're good at to the audience that makes sense for them. And being that individual voice, I find myself looking for individual voices that are experts on certain topics when I need more than that kind of generic type of answer that I'm going to get. And so it's an interesting shift a little bit.
And is everything.
Yeah.
If you don't have brand, you don't have recall. Mitch Joel, my friend Mitch Joel, says this phenomenally. He says it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
I
Right?
love that.
When someone thinks about fast food, what brand comes to mind? When someone says I want a cup of coffee, what brand comes to mind? And people only have a limited amount of brain space. So your brand has to be strong. And that's one of the reasons why personal brands, the individuals, stand out, because we are biologically primed to remember individual humans, right? For example, in any image, you put a human face, we lock onto it. That's just our biology. We've evolved to do that. So we have to think as marketers, how do we build brands that in some cases literally are human, and in other cases have such a strong brand promise that people remember who we are.
That's definitely in line, articulated well, around and what we're seeing. And even that trickles down into a really technical B2B space. It's pervasive across industries and across applications. So that's great. Okay, so that's kind of SEO and brand. What about data analytics? What kind of lift are you seeing from whether it's AI tools or generative AI itself for data analytics for sales and marketing?
Not much, because people didn't use data to begin with. Right?
I know. Well, that's one of the things we keep saying, right? Is like, look at the tools you already use and what's already built in there that you can work with, So that's always a start.
It is, but here's the challenge. So much of marketing is now dark that you have no idea. So like, you're not getting any data out of LinkedIn, right? You're not getting data out of most social networks. Facebook just canceled its CrowdTangle service. You're for sure not getting any data out of the site formerly known as Twitter, because they started charging an arm and a leg for their API, because everyone and their cousin in the tech marketing space has realized their data is super valuable for training AI. So they've put up the walls. You have your own data. The Google Analytics somehow manages to get less useful every year. They just say, oh yeah, we're getting rid of conversions. They're now key events. Like, why'd you do that? Oh, so it lines up better with Google Ads. So this is not about us. This is about you. And think about, as these tools push more and more of us out of public spaces, like social media in general, especially during the election year, it was already a sewer. Now it's a sewer that's on fire. You will hang out in places like Slack or Discord or group chats or WhatsApp. And that's where conversations happen. That's where buying decisions happen. That's where recommendations happen. And you see none of it, which means that attribution is getting much, much harder. What you see in your Google Analytics is essentially a small sample of what may be happening. And you have no way of knowing beyond what you can see in the spaces that you have control over, what's actually happening. So a big part of a marketer's job, in some ways, is almost being like a forensic anthropologist, going to asking customers, hey, where do you hang out online? And you go to those places and you look around and you listen. You do a little detective work. Listen, you're in all these different Slack communities, all these different Discord servers, going, well, what are people saying here? And that is important for qualitative information, but it means the almost total loss of quantitative information. So when we talk about using AI generative AI, especially for analytics, it's predicated on having data to analyze. And if your buyers, particularly in B2B, or any complex sale, if your buyers are having conversations and doing business outside of public data collection tools, you can't analyze it. There's nothing to analyze.
Is it feasible to put systems in place to kind of bring that data analysis back home, bring that data collection back home, or are we shifting towards using more qualitative information to make decisions?
There's absolutely ways to bring it home. You just have to be an appealing enough place that people would want to call it home, right? So we have a Slack group, Analytics for Marketers, like 3,000 marketers that hang out in there. So we invest a lot of time and energy making sure that is a useful place. I have, as you mentioned, I have several newsletters, several podcasts. My personal newsletter is like 280,000 subscribers. So if I need to ask the audience for something, some kind of information, I have access to an audience
Yep.
to ask. Companies and marketers need to seriously say, like, how much value could I provide that someone would actually want to spend what little time they have with me?
I think that those types of audiences will become so valuable, and that ties back even to that personal brand and branding, and be that expert that people think of. That's great. Another question, kind of with these nuanced B2B type of audiences. So we work with a lot of clients who work on really confidential projects and things like that. What does it look like for those organizations to run local LLMs on local networks? Are you seeing that happen yet? Or are you think about things like aerospace and defense and healthcare, or are they just keeping their hands off right now for a while to let things settle? What are you seeing kind of just trends wise in that space?
It depends on the industry. Healthcare certainly is looking at both local models, particularly for protected healthcare information, and then also enterprise models. So, for example, if you're a Microsoft shop, you can get a version of ChatGPT inside your Azure instance, and that means that it is governed by your existing Azure policies, by your terms of service, by your service level agreement, and as one would expect, it is reassuringly expensive to do so. But that is, clearly an option. If you're in a Google shop, there are Google Cloud contained versions of these. All the big tech vendors are going to allow you to spend your money with them in protected environments. Now, for the most sensitive information, yes, there are definitely companies where we have one client who dropped like $500,000 on NVIDIA hardware, which got them like 3 GPUs because it's crazy expensive to run model inferencing locally. I don't necessarily agree with how they did their deployment, but that was their choice. And a lot of the reasons people would run these models for other than data security are becoming moot. So a lot of people were looking at building these models to fine tune them. Fine tuning is getting less and less useful as a standalone thing, because the large public models have such huge working memories that you don't really need to to build a model just to do one task. You could just give it a lot of examples, and it will perform really well. But yeah, for protected information, certainly. One of the interesting things that I think is happening is that governments in particular are really far behind. I mean, further behind than usual, but really far behind, because everyone who is in this space is making bank at the big tech companies. Like, why would I want to go work for a 3-letter government agency for $70,000 a year when I can add a zero to that salary and go to the Valley instead?
Yeah, that's very true. I imagine it'll be slow. I live in DC. We're around it all the time. And actually, AI is not a topic that comes up in just kind of regular conversation. So it's interesting, just the difference there. Okay, that's great. I have one more question. I know we're about at time, but I wanted you to talk about your 5P framework a little bit. You talk about prompting and really helping people kind of get started with generative AI or make their prompting better when they walk through that.
So the 5P framework was invented by my co-founder, Katie Robert, and it's more of a management consulting framework. So it stands for purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. The 5 things that you need to have aligned to make any project worth its time, right? So purpose, why are you doing the thing? Like what useful purpose does it serve? One of the dangers of AI is a lot of people doing AI for AI's sake. And it's like, okay, I got a blender. What can I blend? Well, if you're making steak, probably not a great idea. Then you have the second step is the people. Who are the people involved, both on the customer side and internally? Do you have the resources? Do you have the skills to do what it is you want to do? Number 3 is what process exists right now that you'd want to digitally transform with AI in some fashion or capacity. Number 4 is the platform, like what tools and technologies, what does your AI tech stack look like? And number 5 is the performance, the measurement. How do you know that the thing worked, right? Did you save time? Did you save money? Did you make money? And using this framework for any evaluation of a task is a useful way to say, like, yeah, should we be using AI for this or not? the classic example, hey, I spent 80 hours automating a task that takes 2 minutes. Like, that was probably not the best choice, unless you learned something from it. But then that would be encoded in the purpose. The purpose was not to save time. The purpose was to learn something, in which case that makes it okay. A lot of companies really do risk having, just doing AI for AI's sake, which is it can be a bit of a waste of time. The bigger danger for a lot of companies is actually the reverse, where at least according to the 2024 Work Trend Index from Microsoft and LinkedIn, 75% of knowledge workers are using AI at work with or without permission. And in many cases, they're using the free tools, which means that they're handing over the confidential data to third parties without permission, which is a whole other bag of worms. But a lot of these employees, these individuals, have figured out the 5 Ps for themselves. Like, hey, I can use this tool and I can take a 6-hour task and make it a 6-minute task. And so I can stop being as overworked at work because you ain't paying me anymore. And I think this raises some very interesting, very thorny questions that companies have to tackle, which is, what is the role of AI in the workplace? How can you provide it safely? Should you lean into it because clearly your workers see there are efficiencies to be had, even if you don't approve of them? Then what happens to the future of work? This is the same thing that's happening in education right now. So students are submitting work generated by AI, and then teachers are using AI to grade that work. It's like, okay, so your AI talked to my AI, and they're going to do lunch, right? What is the value of a term paper? What is the value of a blog post when AI summarizes everything? What is the value of your email marketing when your AI summarizes what's in your inbox? What is the value of any of these things? And so for a lot of different industries, marketing and education and stuff, it's really more about what is the experience you're trying to provide to someone. And if the experience is good enough, AI will be a poor substitute. If I show you a photo of Melbourne, Australia, where I was 2 weeks ago, that photo is a poor summary of the actual experience, but it makes you want to go and have the experience. If I show you a photo of a tipped over porta potty, you're like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to experience that. I'm good.
Yep.
A lot of AI summarization is saying, yeah, your brand experience as a marketer is the tipped over porta potty, right? The AI summary is good enough. We don't need to go any further. And this is a big, big strategic change for marketers. How do you make your marketing suck less than an AI summary? Right now, it sucks more and no one wants it.
Bold that quote. So many times I think people are coming and they're saying, well, can we use AI to do that? And it's those questions, right? Does it even make sense? Before you sit down and try and hash it out or spend forever crafting some kind of prompt or tool, just making sure that it's the right use of time. And we get so distracted by the flashing lights, I think, sometimes. But we've got to evaluate it like any other type of platform that we would implement. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Your gains are going to be deploying AI internally, right? So use AI to help someone do their expense reports and their timesheets and all the BS that happens in a corporation that is a complete waste of time. Sending your AI agent to the 15th meeting that could have been an email, right? So like, I don't need to be at the email. My AI can be there. It can summarize the meeting, tell me the 2 things you wanted me to do that you could have put in an email to begin with. And the stakeholder of the meeting can hear themselves talk for 45 minutes and feel good about themselves. What are all the internal efficiencies that you can take with machines and get rid of them, right? Get rid of them. And you're not going to be putting yourself out of a job because it's all the crap you don't want to do anyway. And allows you to be better at the things that you are. There will absolutely be job losses from this technology. And they will be substantial and they will be sooner than you think. There will also be new careers created that, frankly, we have a hard time imagining. There's one, I was talking to this friend of mine who is a PhD. An AI company has hired them to write content that will never see the light of day. It is being created just as training data for this company's AI. They have a very bespoke system they want to do. And this person's getting paid $40 an hour to crank out articles on this very obscure topic that will never be seen by another human being, but it will be training data for this one company for their unique AI. That's a job that didn't exist 18 months ago.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I love that. And speaking of jobs, if you watch Chris's videos, at the end of a lot of them, he'll share open positions at companies around the country, which is always just a great value add for this marketing community for sure. Well, that's all I have as far as questions. I really appreciate your insight. Love hearing just kind of what's on your mind, and what you've got on deck. What is the best way that people can connect with you or your content?
The best way people can find me is in two places. Number one, for anything work related, go to trustinsights.ai. That's our company. And number two, if you want to read my personal stuff, go to christopherspenn.com.
Perfect. People can do that, and we'll put those in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. This is a great episode for our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day. Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.